You are listening to the Ibn Abi Umar podcast. This is your host, Umar Osman. Welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been a while since the last upload, and there's a very good reason for that, which I will share here momentarily. This episode is a recording of an Instagram live that I did with Hafsa Taher. So she had invited me to speak to her business coaching group Circle of Impact about an Islamic approach to habits. And then this was a follow up conversation going into detail on Instagram and its effects on spirituality, friendship, the effects of who you follow, the company that you keep online. We even got into a little bit of business and marketing, touched on a lot of interesting subjects. So, inshallah, hope you find that to be beneficial. I'll link to her Instagram and all that good stuff in the show notes below. But the announcement that I was hinting at the beginning is, Alhamdulillah, the Fiqh of Social Media book is finally done. This is something I've been working on since forever. And it only took a global pandemic to be able to finally finish it out. But alhamdulillah, it's done. I will have a lot more information about where to buy it and launching it and all that good stuff, hopefully within the next few days. I'm self-publishing it, so learning a lot through this process, getting things finalized, and we'll be launching soon. So I'll be sharing more about that as soon as I can, but just wanted to give everyone a heads up to please keep an eye out for that. And with that, hope you enjoy the episode.
So you've been with so many different organizations, and you've been talking about fiqh of social media for, I'm going to say 6 to 7 years, because while doing my homework last night, I found a podcast from 2014. And so what has changed since in the last 7-8 years since you have been on this journey?
So the funny thing is, so the technology has changed a lot, and the way that we interact with it has changed a lot. But I would say a lot of the spiritual things are still the same challenges, in terms of just sheer changes that we see. When I see my Facebook memories pop up, it's always hilarious because I'm like, oh, like I used to post on Facebook. I used to check into places on Facebook. We used to post pictures on Facebook for everyone to look at. Like it's so weird looking back at how we interacted on that platform. And then now, for example, Facebook is just a cesspool of politics. And where we would share a lot of family things, we no longer share those family things.
Yeah.
I think, we look at things like Twitter, and Twitter was like a very big public group chat for a while, where you and all your friends were just all tagging each other and carrying out conversations. And those conversations are still happening, but that has migrated now to the group chat, right? So like little WhatsApp groups or other text message groups or things like that. So they're still happening, they're still in groups, they're still on a social network of some sort, but it's no longer in the public eye. And I think Snapchat coming along plays a role in that, in making everyone accustomed to the idea of posting something and it disappearing in 24 hours, or not retaining a permanent record of it to go back and look at, which I think that's a great change and a great way of looking at it a little bit differently. That you're not creating all these breadcrumbs. I mean, you're still creating breadcrumbs. That's a whole different issue, but you're not creating like a public track record that anyone can just, look up your name and suddenly see 15 years of family history meticulously documented online.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of Facebook, right, my niece who's like 13 now, she thinks Facebook is for old people. So I'd actually be really interested to see how many people here watching this have used Facebook, because we are kind of old now. So and then it's kind of been shifted from Facebook. There's been a couple more social media platforms that came and went between Facebook and Instagram now. And with Instagram and this influencer world, it's just fairly new, don't you think so? Like we didn't have influencers back in the world. How has this changed the relationship with social media?
So the influencer thing I think is very interesting because, and I mean that this could go in a whole bunch of different ways, but it introduced the idea that anyone can gain some level of popularity or influence just by posting certain things. And, of course, that's a mixed bag. It's a tool like everything else. That could be something that's beneficial and powerful. It could also be something very manipulative and deceptive. And we always see examples of both. But it's unique in the sense that if we take a broader vision of what's happened, right? So if we take a vision of, like, let's say 20 years, well, 20 years ago, not any, I couldn't just create a platform, I
Yeah.
couldn't just write a book or,
Needed someone to kind of,
have an email list to just reach thousands of people or whatever the case may be. Someone would have to have selected me and decided to let me through the gate. And once they let me through the gate, then, I'll be on TV, or maybe an op-ed gets published in the newspaper or something like that. With social media, the gatekeepers are all gone. And so now it's a free for all. And so anyone can build a following, anyone can gain popularity, which, again, that it could go either way.
right. So now like being having that popularity, having that fame, having like a following is a huge responsibility. What are some things you think, like, as people who, I mean, some people think it's overnight, but as an Instagram coach, I know it takes years and years and years, right? And when they do get to that place, and some people do have overnight success, I'm not denying that. And when they do get to that place, when they have that following, when they become that influencer, what are some things that you think they need to keep in mind? And they have this power, this insane amount of, almost like a burden, right? Because there are people that are following them. What are some thoughts that are going in your head about someone who's actually at that level?
So I'm going to preface this by saying that you and I will probably disagree quite a bit on my take here. Uh, just because I know that my Instagram profile is you could probably use my Instagram profile as a case study of what not to do if someone's trying to build a business or get popular, right? It's private, it's not searchable, there's no hashtags, there's no nothing. It's just, dumb pictures of coffee every day. Like it's not what you would recommend someone to do. Now, the unique challenges, and I think you brought up a good word, which is the responsibility that comes with the platform. And I think that's a very important mindset that should be a foundational part of someone's approach to building a platform, that ultimately is an amana of some sort, right? Like you're reaching an audience, people are consuming your content. There is a level of trust and amana that you have to uphold in what you're producing, what you are promoting, and just the content that you're putting out. Like you have to be able to sleep at night, so to speak, that, I'm acting in an ethical manner. I'm not promoting things that I don't believe in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one other thing that I'll point out, and this, might be a little bit of a different spin on it, is I would recommend people not to rush into it. Like you said, it's not overnight. It comes slowly, and there's benefits to that. The trap is that there's a lot of strategies where you can quickly build a following. But one trap that I would warn people about is this. Once you do build a large following, you lose a lot of creative freedom. You lose a lot of ability to experiment. You lose a lot of ability to do different things because the level of scrutiny is higher. The larger that your platform gets, the more expectations there are, the more responsibility there is, and the more that people are going to be paying attention to what you do. And so your ability to just kind of be free and do whatever you want does go away. So, there's trade-offs with everything, right? There's a trade-off in being small. Well, you're not going to reach an audience. If you're trying to build a business, then you're probably not going to get sales. But on the flip side, the larger that your platform is, there is a trade-off with some of those other things as well.
Right. That's where the conversation comes in about boundaries, because even as an Instagram coach, I'm always talking about deleting your Instagram for a day or so, like maybe once a week, because the more you take time off, the more you can actually live like off the phone. Because
Yeah.
one of the, we will talk about addictions as well, because especially with someone with a following, there is that dopamine rush that you get every single time somebody follows you. You have like 100 new followers today, or 50 new followers today, or like 10 unfollows. It just takes your emotional state up and down really quickly. And that's why boundaries come into place. But going back to that conversation about we were having in the beginning about the subconscious effect of the people that you follow have on you. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a hadith Prophet said that the example of good company and bad company is like that of the musk seller and the blacksmith, right? So it's like the perfume store. You go in, it smells good, you put some on, you feel nice, you maybe get a sample, you buy some. Either way, being in that environment is a net positive of some sort, right? You visit the blacksmith, we can see like the car mechanic, shake the mechanic's hand, your hand gets dirty, it smells bad, it's soot, it makes you feel sick, the waiting room is disgusting, the coffee's stale, you sit down, chairs are dirty, by the time you get home you want to take a shower, right? So he gave us this example of good company and bad company, and the point being, the company that you keep has an effect on your subconscious. Whether you want to admit it or not, The company that you keep affects you. And so online, that's literally who you follow and whose content you consume. And so the company that you're following online is going to have an impact on the way that you see the world, the way that you shape your decisions. And if we really think about it, if we look at the last 2 years, every restaurant you've ever decided to eat at, the things that you've decided to go on Amazon and order, the books that you've decided to read, the shows that you've decided to watch, the podcasts that you've decided to listen to, the clothes that you've decided to buy, the shoes that you decide, all of those things have been heavily influenced by the content that you consume on social media.
So you talk about like the people you follow, it's kind of like the people you're hanging out with. But just to play devil's advocate, someone might say it's like watching the news. I don't get attached to the news. I don't just buy anything I see on ads. I have the agency to decide. Like, how do you distinguish? What do you say to that?
I think that's a very intellectually arrogant way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And I think it's discounting the level of environmental factors. There's a reason the Prophet said that if you want to know someone's religion, look at the religion of their closest friend.
Right.
Because at one point or another, there is an alignment between who you are and who you follow, right? Yeah. And so if we take something like the news, it's not as easy as you just being discerning. That's playing checkers while the news is playing chess. Like, I'm going to watch the news and be discerning. It's like, no, this entire construct is designed to monetize your fear and anxiety, quite literally, right? And so, yes, I can watch the news and I can know that, oh, this person from this party is saying something that's factually incorrect, and I'm smart enough to recognize that. Well, like, okay, yeah, you are, maybe, but the fact that you're consuming so much news is going to generally put you into a state of anxiety and fear and panic and nervousness and this feeling of the world ending. And we've seen that in America for the last 4 years. In case anyone has like any doubt of that, it's like every 6 months there's a news cycle of, oh my God, the world is going to end, America's going to turn into this, turn into that. And it's like, no, for most people, life kind of went on, but you consuming that content warped your worldview into only focusing on these couple of things. That's what it does. It warps your attention to something that they want. So yeah, I might be discerning between good news and bad news, but the thing is that they made me consume the news for hours instead of something else. And that's where they won, no matter how discerning I am.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about proximity, like it just being in your hand. I mean, not even in your pocket, right? Like in your hand 24/7. And also the frequency, like how many times you log into Facebook, how many times we check our Instagram feed, how many times we see that person on stories. I think there's that frequency of like almost feeling like you know this person, you like this person, you have this relationship with this person, and the other person doesn't even know you exist. And it's just so one-sided that you don't even realize in your head.
Absolutely. And that's, it becomes important who you're following, because if you see an update from someone 20 times a day, right? Like, there's a fair question to ask some parents, like, do you have 20 different conversations with your kids throughout the day? Like, right. People that you would say that you're very close to, you don't interact with as much. And so the level of impact that they have on you is extremely profound.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's like sometimes we lose that perspective of who we are close to, because we know more about these influences than we know about what's happening in our own family members' lives. And those of you that are watching, if you have comments, if you have questions, share your gems in the comments. And if you have questions, just use this question sticker at the bottom. So this way I can quickly find them as we close to the end. So we talked about we kind of touched on this impact of social media on spirituality. Do you want to expand on that and the connection? How does it impact our connection with God?
There's so many ways that it impacts. I would say, if we want to talk about one, and because I know that a lot of your audience is also maybe business minded, and I think that might be a place to start, which is, what you consume shapes your reality. So if someone is following, for example, only motivational accounts, right? That every day all you see is like, if not now, then when? If not you, then who, right? Like they're just posting that stuff all day. And you're only seeing stories of people that are just like, all you have to do is just take action and you'll achieve this. And they're posting pictures every day of them achieving all these things, you start to think that I'm the only one, right? Everyone else's life is amazing. I'm the one that's doing horrible. And that is at the root of so many spiritual diseases, right? It causes envy, right? You start to develop hasad for other people. It causes a breakdown in your level of tawakkul, also in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it goes from an idea of I need to supplicate to my sustainer, the one that provides for me, and be content with what he gives me. Yes, I can continue asking for more, but it's in his hands versus, and this is a very like subtle nuance and mentality of, well, I did the work, therefore I am entitled to this outcome because everyone else is getting that outcome. And I think
Right.
that's one of the most dangerous things that we see on Instagram, is that this idea that if you just follow this blueprint that someone else laid out, you should achieve these same results. And it
Yeah.
eliminates all other environmental factors from the equation. And that's something that I think is very destructive.
Right. Actually, there's a coach that I used to follow. He said, it's like an Amazon order. You place your order and you place your order and you'll get the package. You know, that's how
Yeah.
like he basically, but that's how the power. He's not Muslim, obviously. He didn't use the word dua, but he's like, that's how the power of intention is, manifestation is, right? So, and I
Yeah.
think there is definitely a place for to talk about like what failures is. And I actually messaged this in my mastermind group. As a business coach, I talk about motivation and inspiration, but there's definitely a place to talk about failure, because, and failure in quotes, because as Muslims, we believe that the state of a believer takes good in everything, right? Like if good comes to him, he's grateful, but if it doesn't, he's patient and he's content. So I think there's definitely a place for us saying like, yes, you tie the camel, yes, you basically do your part, and then you leave the rest to God. Like you have to let go and say, what is meant for me will come my way. And after a while, you have to say, maybe this isn't the right thing for me. Maybe
Right.
like the example he gave about the basketball player in that conversation we had inside Circle of Impact, where he said, just because you wanted to be a basketball player, was it a basketball player? He said,
Yeah.
no, yeah, you can't be. Like maybe you should talk about that again.
I say just because, in that entitlement factor is like, just because I'm
You
very
want,
passionate about something doesn't mean that I deserve to get to do it, right? And, yes, maybe I'm passionate about basketball. And maybe I'm passionate about running my own business,
yeah,
but not everyone gets to do that, right? And some people, they're going to work 9 to 5. And this, by the way, is another part of that Instagram culture where everyone is promoting something, right?
right,
Everyone's promoting something. And so in order to promote their thing, they have to make you feel bad about where you are. And so that's one thing that you see is like, well, if you don't, and if you don't do this and become your own boss, then you're going to be slave to the 9 to 5, and you're a cog in the machine, and you're this and you're that, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, well, if that was the case, everyone would be doing it, right? But that's not everyone's situation. Some people prefer work. Some people,
lost your audio. Either? I think we lost your audio. Just when everyone is saying loving this discussion.
am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Okay.
Okay. So I got a phone call, so I had to put it on do not disturb. All right. But what I was saying is
Um,
everyone has, everyone has different situations in life, right? And so is what Instagram will do is it will always make you feel bad about your situation because there's always going to be something else better.
right.
Not realizing like it's perfect no matter how much they portray it. It's just everyone has a different set of problems to deal with, right? So if we take that example of, well, should I be an entrepreneur or should I work 9 to 5? It's like, well, it depends on your situation. How much risk tolerance do you have, right? The risk tolerance of someone who's 21 and single is much different than someone who's 45 and about to put kids through college. Do you prefer the headache of having a manager but having a stable paycheck and health insurance, or do you prefer the headache of running your own thing, being on your own schedule, but having to worry about making payroll and having to worry about all these other things, right? Like no one has an easy situation.
No.
It's everyone's trading in one set of problems for another. You
Yeah.
have to figure out where your level of contentment is.
Right. And we forget to see that bigger picture when we see people doing well, having success, and we're like, hey, maybe I should do that too. without realizing that they have their set of like setbacks, they have their sort of struggles, and they didn't get there overnight as well. And I think, like, I mean, it's so cliche, we hear this all the time. It's not the real life, it's the real life, but we still fall for it every single day. How come she's always so happy? How come her life is so amazing? How come my life sucks? How come I have these ups and downs? Why am I struggling? Why am I such a failure? I think, and that's a great point about that really.
And,
that,
and by the way, part of that is the algorithms online, yeah. Right? So we talk about things like Instagram. Well, the exotic vacation photo will get more engagement than me posting a picture of my backyard that has nothing in it, right? Because it's not very interesting. Yeah. But a picture from the Maldives is very interesting, and so everyone's going to like it. And so it incentivizes only posting the highlights. And yeah. So when you consume that, yeah, intellectually you might know that well, everyone has ups and downs, but it affects you. Like, look, here's a good example, right? Like, when someone's going through a tough time at work or business, and it's like, man, back's against the wall, like I'm about to be laid off, or this is happening, that's happening, whatever, like it's tough. What happens? You log on to LinkedIn, and you log into LinkedIn, and now it's like, well, this idiot that I worked with just got promoted. The other person that I work with that I'm smarter than and more talented than and more skilled than just moved on to this company that's my dream company. And so you start looking at it, and it's like, man, everyone else is doing awesome. My life is the only one that's horrible. But it's like, well, yes, people are going to post their promotions on LinkedIn, but no one's going to promote that they just got put on probation by their manager because their performance was subpar. Like, no one's going to post that on LinkedIn, but that's real life.
Like, even with the du'as, I think even in the Muslim coachy world, I think there is this: set your intention, make the dua, and the outcome will be exactly what you want. And as someone who's always struggled, and business didn't come easy to me, I know people will have never seen this side of things. It's like I've really struggled, especially like the last 2 years have been so much of like going back and forth, trying things out, or this didn't work and this worked. It's like, yes, you make the dua, but the outcome is not guaranteed. Like, if you get the outcome, great, but you need to, like, it's not a failure on your part if you don't get the outcome.
And this is where I think spiritually there's like a very fundamental disconnect, like just in your basic iman with, so we know, for example, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that your dua is, when you make duas, it's either answered, or something that was evil will have been prevented from you, or you will see the result of that dua in the hereafter, right? In all of these cases, there's an element that I have to have a level of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will give me what is best. And the problem, even from a spiritual perspective of the, just make the intention, make dua, and you'll get the outcome. And I do see people saying that more and more, is that, and I'm not saying that this is explicit or that someone is explicitly intending this, but there is an undertone of entitlement in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a very dangerous ground to go down.
Yeah. And also, it kind of is like an implication. If you didn't get it, you either didn't make the right intention, you sucked at your manifestation, or you actually sucked in your making dua, maybe you didn't make it for tahajjud. And all those factors do play a part. I'm not saying they don't. Yes, you should make intense duas. Like, yes, you should make more duas, and then you complain about it. And all of that do matter, but the outcome is still not dependent on how you ask, or dependent on on what you do. The outcome is still dependent on what Allah's will is.
Yeah, and I think this is where the idea of process over outcome is very important.
Right. Yeah.
You have, and I think as a Muslim, you have to tie yourself to process more than you tie yourself to outcome. And one thing that's very interesting is, like, I remember reading some people's, I think some scholars said that one of the wisdom sometimes of someone's dua not being answered is that had the dua been answered, the person would have just stopped making that dua. And the reward of them constantly making dua every day was actually more useful for them than getting what it is that they wanted, right? And so it requires a much different perspective when you come at it as a Muslim as to how you're viewing and treating outcomes. Because for us, it's you do your part the best that you can, and then that's that. Like, it's out of your control ultimately.
Right. And I think that's where, like, the barakah culture mindset comes along too. And in terms of the gardener mindset, we talk about inside Circle of Impact, and with all my clients, Your job is just to do the action. And going back to, like, I actually always remember this verse in the Quran. I don't know what the exact verses, but when Ibrahim alayhi salam was commanded to call people for Hajj, he said, how am I going to call the nations, call the entire world for Hajj? And Allah is like, you just do your part, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's my the message. And I think, as the gardener mindset, our job is to just keep sowing the seeds, keep planting the seeds, because the outcome is not in our hands. We are only responsible for our effort, and this is where the process-based goals is. And those of you that are listening and not sure what we're talking about, process-based goals is, I will post every single day on Instagram for the next 30 days, or the next 6 months, the next 3 months, in order to see a result, versus saying, I'm going to get, in the next 3 months, I want to get to 10K. So one is like process, what I will do, what I'm responsible for. The other is outcome based. So what we're talking about is setting goals that are process, like doing what is in your control, versus versus assigning your outcome to the result that you want at the end, which is not in your hands. So as we are talking about taking action and posting every single day for the next 30 days, let's talk about online phone addictions.
Okay. What about it?
Okay, as someone who's like constantly checking their phone, as someone who's like checking their social media, checking their WhatsApp, like 100 times a day. I don't know. I haven't checked how many times I've picked up the phone in the last like couple of weeks. But as someone who's like constantly needing to check the phone, like, where does that come from? How do we work around it? What are some tips to kind of implement?
You know, I think the answer to this question is different in 2020 than it would be at any other time, just because most of us are at home. And so, a lot of even things that we had cut down, we've now picked back up, just because we're not meeting people, we're not going out, we don't have a way of doing any offline supplement to our lives, right? Like, I mean, personally, I have not been to Jummah prayer in about a month. Our masjid opened back up and then they closed back down because our area got way too crazy, right? So, in the last 15 days, I've left my house maybe once or twice, like just to run errands, but not to like meet people and hang out and, absolutely nothing like that. So I want to preface this by saying that this year is a bit of an exception, in the sense that I get that everyone's spending more time on their phone because that's how they're staying connected. So under normal circumstances, though, and even then, I would say that there's certain things about how you interact, how you let your attention be dictated. And so I think the main thing really is intentionality in terms of when you're checking things and how you're checking them. So, one basic example is like, turn off notifications. Don't let the phone buzz and beep and ding and get your attention to look at it, but let it be something where I'm intentionally going and checking, certain things. The other thing I do is I set timers. Now I'll be like, okay, I'll be very honest, right? So I have a 15-minute timer for Facebook, and honestly, most days I don't get the timer alert, because I don't spend that much time on it. And sometimes it'll be like at nighttime, and I'll get that 15-minute alert, and I'm like, okay, cool, I didn't do too bad.
Yeah.
Instagram has like a 30-minute limit, and I usually hit it by lunchtime, right?
Yeah.
So it's very different. But I would say just being intentional in your usage, cutting out notifications is a big part of it. Like WhatsApp, I don't have notifications on. No red badges, no beeps, nothing like that. Same with email, same with, all of those things. And just try to minimize your usage. I see one question: what about if someone's job revolves around social media? I would say this would be my suggestion, is I think, look, being in social media is not any different from any other job, right? Even if you had like a regular corporate job, it can vary. You might have a job where you're expected to answer emails all evening, and so you have your work email on your phone and you're checking it all evening until night and going to bed. It's the same whether it's social media or not. But what I would recommend is that you find some way to differentiate the two. One thing that I did personally, so I was in a situation at work a couple of years ago where we had a very hectic on-call schedule. So the week that I was on call, I could get called any time of day or night, right? And so I essentially, those weeks that I was on call, I did not want to even see my work email because I needed the break. And so I ended up getting a second phone altogether. I paid for it out of pocket, but I put all my work stuff on that phone. So the week that I was on call, I kept that work phone with me. When I wasn't on call, the work phone stayed locked away in like a laptop bag or something. I just never looked at it. But that let me bring some environmental differentiation to,
Yeah.
home and work. Now, if your job is social media, I would say the same thing, right? Like maybe you have an iPad and the iPad is logged into all of your things that you do for work. And look, let's be realistic. No one needs to be on social media 24 hours, even if it's their job. That's just not realistic. There are so many programs that you can batch post and schedule things and do all of these things. I would recommend that you have another device that's logged into all those accounts. You batch your processes, you plan out your posts, put them all in, and then your personal device that's on you, it doesn't have that stuff, so you can't check it.
I think it was Atomic Habits that talked about even the place you designate to do certain things, and what you're talking about is basically the connection that you have with your work, right? Like either it's your device, like certain devices remind you of work, certain devices don't. Like certain,
Yep.
you want to create that distinction. So it's like, so when you're checking your phone, it's not work related. So even like when I in my like I actually just have like one room that I kind of spend most of my time in. I have a couch where I only do like Netflix or like chilling on. Bed, I do not use my bed to like watch Netflix because I want to associate that with like sleeping. And then I have like my desk and my chair where I do most of my work. So being able to create those distinctions even where you do work, I think is a great idea. And again, like maybe even creating folders if you only have one device, or maybe just getting like an Android or cheaper tablet to be able to say, hey, this is my chill thing, this is my work thing, so I'm not going to touch it during the other times. I think we have forgotten what mental sanity, things, what
Yeah.
disconnection, sanity. Especially COVID, I know where it just feels like you have to keep up on top, stay on top of everything, but we don't. We have to
Yeah.
learn to live our lives that are offline these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even like as people are working from home and stuff, it's important.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a big work from home tip that goes uh, a little bit overlooked is, I tell people like if you're working from home and you weren't working from home before, block out space that is only for work. Now, if you have an office, awesome, that's great. But not everyone has an office.
Right.
Maybe it's your little breakfast table that has 4 chairs and you designate one chair as the work chair.
Yeah.
And the other 3 chairs are for fun or for eating or whatever, but you designate one spot that like when I'm in that spot, I'm working. Digitally, it's the same thing, that if you do a lot of work digitally, again, my recommendation, if it's possible, get another device and that device is dedicated to it. If
Right.
not, then do what you mentioned and put them into separate folders, put them on a different screen, but do something to differentiate so that you're not always on.
Right. Yeah, and I think like with Instagram, I only have one profile. That's my personal thing. With Facebook, I post my business stuff that and it gets really the lines kind of blur out when you're using the same application, the same app. Nobody uses the word application anymore. The same app for both the purposes, and it's
Yeah.
hard to draw the lines. Like when I see my notifications, which ones for my friends, which DMs. So I think that's when you just have to completely disconnect. Like I'm not going to
Yeah.
lose out much if I just delete my Instagram like for the weekend. They'll find me. If anybody needs to reach me, they'll WhatsApp me, they'll email me and reach me some other way. I think especially as online businesses, as people working from home, we need those boundaries more and more. And this I think goes back to like the first couple of conversations we had, being conscious of who you follow because of the subconscious effect it has on you, and the impact on spirituality. All of those are, yes, you can stay mindful, but one of the biggest things is cut down your time on social media. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, in anything that I've read or come across, the universal recommendation is the more that you cut it out, the better that it is. I mean, there's no getting around it that it's the net negative is more than the net positive. Now, understandably, that's not realistic for most people. And again, recognizing our reality, it's much harder now when we're feeling more and more disconnected, right? And so we do use these tools to stay in touch with people and so on. So, it's more important, I think, than it being an either or, that it be more making my usage more intentional
Right.
and making sure that I am managing how my attention and effort is spent rather than the device controlling those things for me.
Yeah. And also, I think it's about the quality over quantity because, I mean, yes, we are constantly on social media, but how much of those are really filling you, right? So I think you talked about connection. Yes, we are missing that connection. but scrolling through Instagram is not filling that bucket, right? So
Yeah.
maybe it's calling that one person and having that maybe a video call with them. Maybe there is that need for connection, and I guess for each one of us, we have to identify what is it going to take to fill that bucket.
Yeah. And also, and look, and I don't discount the value of, I also don't want people to read into this that this means that you only be productive. So,
Yeah,
I'm going to, unfollow everyone and only follow Mufti Mink and only read Islamic reminders all the time. And that's, alhamdulillah, so like that's not, that's not the recommendation. And like I get it. Like sometimes we need to mindlessly scroll. Sometimes we do just want to scroll through random stories and just see what's going on, because that, right now especially, that's just a way that we do downtime. But again, it's just know that that's what you're doing and be okay with it,
right.
right? Like don't, just be like, hey, I'm just gonna sit, and because like I'll do that after work sometimes, right? So I work and I'm like, I need to decompress. Well, I can't really like go out,
Yeah,
meet someone up or something. So I'm like, I'm just gonna sit down and just kind of catch up on group chats and this and that, and just zone out for a little bit, and then go back to whatever it is that I need to do.
yeah,
But it should not turn into, at 6 o'clock, I sit down on my couch, I open WhatsApp, and then all of a sudden it's 11 p.m.
yeah. Yeah, there needs to be a start and time for it. Consciously saying, "I'm doing this to decompress. This is not working here. I'm just going to
Yeah,
like spend time on social media and catch up on other things that are happening." And I think what happens is sometimes as businesses that I'm talking to, like people like me, we take that time that we've spent on Instagram and be like, I spent so much time on Instagram and it's not giving me any results in my business. And I'm like, you just watched other people lift weights, you didn't do the heavy lifting. And you can't expect to lose weight when you're just watching other people. And I think creating before consuming and trying to like doing your creative work before you actually fill your head with other people's ideas is also a great point that we need to stay mindful of.
yeah, and I think that goes back to the idea of just being intentional with your usage too, right? Like, uh, are you proactively doing something, or did you just open it up and be like, all right, Instagram, tell me what to do and what to look at?
Yeah, yeah. And there was a point in your description of like thick of social media courses. There was a point about how do you apply the concept of modesty in the online world. What was that about?
So I think there's an there, so that's kind of a tough one, but I would say it's this, look, it's the common sense rules. It's, we tend to overcomplicate sometimes, but it's the common sense types of rules of just don't post things that, if your mom saw it, that she would get mad. Like that's like a pretty simple type of rule of thumb, but yet you see that even that sometimes is a difficult rule to follow. So, I see like what these teenagers are posting. I'm going to sound like a complete uncle. That's what these teenagers are posting on like TikTok and stuff. And I'm just like, man, this is, we would never have dreamt of posting something like that, or like pranking our parents that way, just to get likes on a video or something like that. And so, in terms of mods, like, yeah, I mean, that's, it can go a bunch of ways. I would say just use common sense rules in what you're posting, what you're consuming, the things that you're liking or sharing or whatever. Like it, just common sense goes a long way. It's just unfortunately ignored a lot of times.
I think we forget that the online world is the real world as well. I think it just feels like we live in a different space sometimes when we're online, because you're right, the stuff we say, the stuff we post is not something you'd say to someone's face. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, even the online bullying that's happening to bloggers and influencers lately, and also like they would create anonymous accounts. I mean, if you had the guts to say it to their face, right? But
yeah.
they would like they would actually create fake accounts and to actually say mean things to other people, and we wouldn't say these things in person. So I think we have forgotten what we would do in the real world, what the implications of things have, and how we would look, like what our parents would think of us, and we've forgotten those basic common sense when it comes to the online world.
Absolutely. And even that whole idea of like fake accounts and stuff, what's interesting is like all these things we have guidance, right? So the Prophet said that, the worst of people is that the one that has two faces, showing one face to one group and another face to another group. And if, in person you're extremely polite and this and that, and then online all of a sudden you're just like bashing people and hating on them. It's kind of like, well, what are you doing? Like why? What's motivating you to act like that? I think one way of understanding this is that social media is a magnifying lens.
Yeah, of course.
And and it it's not that people weren't hateful before social media. It's not that
Right.
people didn't say mean things before social media. It's just that social media has magnified those things times 100. And so the comments, they sting more. People also have more courage because they're anonymous, behind their keyboard. And so, yeah, these things were always there, but the checks and balances of, let's say, a community are gone, right? Like what what someone could go walk into a masjid and say to someone is drastically different than what they can say to someone in the comment section with a fake account.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. And I think it also goes back to when you feel like it kind of amplifies what's in your heart as well. Like all that hate
Absolutely, yeah,
is an indication of what's going on in your own heart. And I think, I can't remember whether I said this, if you think other people are being fake, it kind of is a reflection of you because you can't see the intention.
yeah.
It's other people are showing off, it's a reflection of what's inside you because you are projecting. And it's a great, I know it kind of sucks, it kind of stings because you're like, well, this is inside me, but it's a great way to it's a great door to kind of start working on your own personal development and being like, maybe there's something here that I need to work on. So as I'm going to open the floor to questions, and as the questions are coming in, make sure to use the question sticker so I can see where the questions are. And if you have any questions for Padona, make sure to ask them now as we are wrapping up. As we are wrapping up, I want to ask you, what are some timeless prophetic principles that'll help us navigate this new age, no matter how things change? And I know you've kind of you've touched on a couple, so if just to wrap things up, maybe you highlight a couple.
So, we talked about intention. Intention is, it's the root of everything, right? And so, um, intention goes a long way. And it doesn't just mean intentionality in your usage, but it's intent in, why am I posting something? Why am I sharing something? Why am I liking something? Why am I interacting with this content? Now, look, it might be, hey, I'm just sharing this because I think it's entertaining or because I like it. That's fine. Doesn't mean that you can only post ayat of Quran or something like that, but just be okay with why you're posting something. Am I posting something just to flex? Well, now maybe I need to pause and reassess. Like, am I sharing the good news of like Allah's blessings on me? Like maybe some people, yes, but or am I showing off? Like those are real questions. Am I posting this because I'm genuinely sharing something good, or am I posting this because, in a passive aggressive way because I want that person to read it and know that it's about them? Like why am I actually doing the thing that I'm doing? And I know that that sounds basic, but the challenge really is this, is that social media is so fast that there's pressure, right? Because again, if you want to win, you have to be first. You have to be quicker than everybody else. And so speed is incentivized. Everything is fast, double tap, comment, like this, that, and you're going through quickly. And in order to assess your intention, it means that you do have to slow down. And, I'll be quite honest, there's a lot of times where I'll post something and I'll just look at it and I'll be like, why did I post this? And look, it might be inconsequential. It wasn't anything bad, but I'll just be like, this is just dumb. And I'll just go back. The moment I assess my intention, usually I go back and delete it just because I'm like, whatever. Right. But I think assessing intention in every aspect of it is a very important part.
It's kind of like think before you speak, right? Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you said something, you wouldn't say like 90% of things you're saying.
Yeah. That's all it is. But the hard thing is that you're not incentivized to slow down and think before you speak. You're encouraged to just fire off whatever you feel or whatever you're thinking at that moment in time. And that's another thing Pasum said, speak good or remain silent. And I think that's the other part, is like you don't have to comment on everything. You don't have to interact on everything. You don't have to have an opinion on everything. No matter how popular it is and how much everyone else is talking about it, like silence is just fine,
Yeah. And I think it kind of also goes back to understanding. We started off the conversation understanding the responsibility you have, the namana it is, right? And everything you amplify, everything you basically, everything you talk about, you are giving it a platform, you are giving it a stage. And you and I had this private conversation about people that we don't fully agree with. Like, do we give them the platform? Do we share credits? And I think this just goes back to the whole conversation about understanding almost a burden this responsibility comes with. This fame, this popularity. Even if people that have 900 followers are saying, "Oh, I don't have 10K," I think any number of following is a following. Because in our offline world, we don't have 900 people following, like trying to understand what's happening in our lives, right?
Yeah.
We downplay numbers like 200, 300, but imagine 200 people in your house. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. And that's, I think, what ends up, the more, you asked earlier about how, should we just cut down on social media? And I think this concept that you raised, right? Like, how would I act if 200 people are at my house watching me? That's a serious question, because 200 followers is not a lot.
No.
You can open an account today and get 200 followers. It's not hard, right? But there is then, the bigger that gets, the more amana there is as to what you are producing, what you're promoting, all of those things. And so I think one thing that happens is people get so infatuated with what are the numbers, what are the metrics, what's the watch time, what's the engagement percentage and comments and this and that and how many shares and all that stuff, that it does become very easy to forget just the basic values and ethics that someone should have, no matter the follower count.
Right. I'm a big fan of smaller accounts. The more engagement, the better your relationship. Yeah, we're treating people like people, right? Because otherwise it's just like numbers. And
Now you're just making me feel better about not having a big following.
so I actually tried giving you advice on social media, and I'm like, you can do this. You're like, well, it isn't intentional. I'm like, okay, never mind. There was a question here. I want to make sure we answer simply in Control's question. What are some intentions influencers should have?
I think a lot of it depends on what type of influence or what industry, right? I think,
Hers is more home organization and home. She can probably tell us better. I'm thinking it's more about like all about home stuff.
I mean, I think there's an easy answer, which is maybe across the board, but I think the intent should be, am I adding value to people, right? And uh, the idea that, okay, if people are following me for this particular topic, am I giving them something of value on that subject or not? And I think someone that's trying to build some level of authority or some level of influence on a particular subject, I think that's a very easy gauge. That, is this something that's useful to the person that's consuming it? Is the content that I'm putting out, if my name gets removed from it, like, would it still be useful? And I think, those types of questions start to hammer at, again, some of the more spiritual sides of it, which is, am I self-promoting? Am I just kind of being shameless? Like, what am I actually doing? And that's really, really tough. And I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I think it literally is sometimes a case by case basis, like post by post. What am I posting? Why am I posting it? What's the value of posting this? Like, it requires a very high level of critical thinking and intentionality.
I think sometimes the more you take yourself out of the equation and kind of look at it more tactically and say, this is my business plan. This is the launch that's happening, and just getting more at a very business level. I think the more you take your ego and yourself out of it, sometimes that's the key. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think counterintuitively,
Yeah.
the more that you shift your focus onto the audience and what's useful for them, the more that your platform ends up growing anyway,
Right.
right?
That's yeah.
Someone that's providing valuable content will, it might be a little bit of a slower spread, but it's going to get noticed at some point, and people will start to come and say, like, okay, this is good value that this person's providing, so I'm going to follow it. You can also hack your way to 10,000 followers, be like, hey, everyone, help me get to, I don't want to pick on people, but like, but I will, but I saw someone post a picture of the people cleaning the Kaaba, saying, let's celebrate our harem heroes, follow my Instagram account and get me to 100,000 followers or something like that. And I was like, what in the world? Like, okay, yeah, people are gonna, see a picture of the harem heroes and like click like or something, but are you really just trying to leverage that to get yourself followers? Like, what good did that do? That's, that looks pretty shameless when you think about it.
Yeah.
Versus, did could you have maybe just provided something useful for people to read and consume that brought an atom's weight of benefit to their day? Like, so, it's easy to see those examples in that way, I think.
Right. And I think that, like, because I look at things in a very business left brain and right brain way. I'm trying to take myself out of the equation of just sowing the seeds, just planting the seeds and being like, you know what, I am doing my part. The number of followers or the outcome, the sales, the customers will come when they are meant to come. And I think that's it, it's just a way of letting go, because otherwise you are the hadith says tie your camel, otherwise you end up strangling your camel. And like,
Yeah. And I think one other principle that's worth mentioning here is having a mentality of ihsan, right? Which is do things in the best possible way. And I think that idea has a lot of implications. So one implication is this, that when I consume other people's content, what do I want it to look like, right? If there are things that turn me off about the way that other people do things, then I should probably not do those, right?
right, yeah,
By the same token, one aspect of ihsan also is, well, okay, if I do have something of value and benefit, then I also need to maybe promote and market it in the best way possible. So then, yes, maybe there is an element of learning how to leverage Instagram or learning how to leverage copywriting and doing those things. But doing it with ihsan means that I'm doing it in an ethical and valuable way where I'm communicating, one, audiences first and foremost in mind, that I am doing things where I'm communicating the value of something so that they can make an educated decision. And I'm doing things on the up and up and not in a way that turns people off. And I think a very good analogy, and I think this might help explain it better, is, and we do this with public speaking all the time, is we teach people, like, when you're giving a khutbah or halaqah or something like that, is your focus on how I look, or is your focus on what the audience is taking away? And that mindset changes a lot.
yeah,
Because if I have a message that I want the audience to understand, then I'm going to learn all the public speaking techniques in order to make sure that I know how to carefully craft a speech, that I know how to make it flow, that I know how to use effective examples, that I know how to quote things, I know how to do proper storytelling, I know how to make the audience understand why it's relevant and why it's important. I understand how to do all of these things so that they accept this message that is of value to them.
right, right,
That's drastically different from, I hope I go viral on YouTube, so
yeah,
I'm going to dress a certain way and I'm going to talk a certain way and I'm going to portray a certain image of myself.
right.
And in the process, I might communicate something that's half valuable, but I'm not doing it in the proper way. And so the idea of ihsan, I think, is very important, where it doesn't mean that you become completely agnostic to, well, I'm just going to do my work and leave the rest. But no, like, ihsan means, yeah, you do all those things in the right way, but
Yeah.
make sure that you're doing them in the best way. And I think one critical question is, when I'm consuming, how do I want that communicated to me?
Right. And I think that's a great point about Ihsan. And I know a lot of people translate that as perfection. I'm not going to put it out there until it's perfect and until it's great. And all of that kind of comes back to fear of, like, what people will think about me, I think. And, or will people think I'm a loser? Will people think I'm a failure? And I think, like, turning the equation, rather than focusing on perfection, focusing on Ihsan, which is excellence. Is that how you translated it?
Yeah, and if we use that example that you mentioned, the focus should be, did I put something out that's of value to other people?
Yeah.
Will someone be able to look at this and get value out of it? If they can, then I'm going to push it out, even though it's slightly imperfect as far as I'm concerned, right? Because the more that I keep the focus on the other person instead of myself, the more that I eliminate a lot of that ego and
Right.
even a lot of the things that the social media incentivizes in terms
Yeah.
of, because it makes me always want to look good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope that answered simply in control's answer question, because we kind of went about it in a roundabout way, I think. One last question from Al Hidayah LLC. She said, "What is the balance between maintain is business and maintaining business Islamic values?" Can you see the question?
Yeah, I can see it, but I'll ask you to go first because this is more up your alley.
I think there shouldn't be a conflict between the two, because the way I have built my business is on Islamic values. I have not done anything, alhamdulillah, and this has been a struggle that kind of goes against Islamic values or goes against my definition of Islamic values. Because for some, pointing and dancing might be okay, but for me, it's not, right? So, like reels, right? So, I have a personal definition of what my Islamic values are, of modesty, of whatever the words, the values are, and I have my own personal definition. Yes, I have pushed myself out of the comfort zone to come on camera, even though my first couple of videos were very awkward, and I have stepped out of my comfort zone, but I've always stayed true to my Islamic values. So my business and Islamic values are kind of go together, so I don't see them as a conflict.
The only thing I would add is just, there's very basic values, and I think when people do business, like if you run a store, you know not to cheat people, you know not to lie, you know not to be deceptive, all of those things, right? I would say the added challenge in social media is that, and if we can just be very frank about it, a lot of the marketing techniques that are taught are against Islamic values in terms of false sense of scarcity, false sense of price inflation, things like that. Like there are some things that are taught as standard practice
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
would be considered
Yeah,
dishonest. And
yeah,
so, there's certain things like that that I would be very aware of. But
right,
again, to answer it in general, a lot of it comes down to the common sense things. Don't cheat people, don't lie to people, don't portray like a false image,
right.
which, sometimes it is easier said than done, admittedly.
Yeah, and I think even in marketing, I know there's a lot of coaches, a lot of gurus that are talking about scarcity, that talk about a fake sense of inflation. And I think it's been a challenge for me. This is why I have been careful about who I pick my mentors to be. Like I work with Sheikh Muhammad Al Sharif, who comes with an Islamic background. I work with the Muhammad Fathers from Productive Muslim. I have mindfully and consciously tried to surround myself and in the social sphere and in who I spend money, my investment with, to like, and yourself as well, and the books that I read, in terms of being mindful of having people help me shift that perspective, shift that what other people are saying, the whole talk about like manifesting, the whole talk about law of attraction. And when you get drowned in there, you're like, oh, this makes sense. But until you actually take a step back and like kind of hear other people's perspective on it, you're like, okay, you know what, that actually is un-Islamic, So I think
Yeah.
it's really important to kind of or be mindful of who you surround you, who you learn your business from, who you learn your marketing from as well. There's one last question I want to take up, and this is the last one, and then we will, I'll
Okay.
ask you one question. Sarah said, how to get over being confident because you feel like there's value that you can bring to others, bring more value. Okay, how to get over
Oh,
being,
not being confident because others can bring more value than you.
okay, yeah,
Um, I I feel like it's a natural response because anytime you're learning something, you're learning something from someone who's better than you at it,
yeah,
right? And so no matter what it is that you're trying, let's say I want to teach something, well, there's always going to be other people who know it better because those are the people that I'm learning from.
right,
But that doesn't mean that everyone else is following those same people. It doesn't mean that everyone else is at the same level. Uh, I know this is an extreme example, but a college calculus professor would be a terrible first grade math teacher. They would not know how to teach first grade math, even though their knowledge and qualification of math is, beyond reproach. But
yeah,
someone that's teaching first grade has to have a very different skill set. And so, no matter what level you're at, uh, if you have some experience with it and something to offer, it'll bring value to someone. Now, how many people that brings value to, that might be debatable, right? But I wouldn't worry about you not being the best.
yeah.
The fact that there are so many people who are better than you probably isn't actually quite the opposite. It's probably an indicator that you're in the right place because it means that there's people of varying skill levels who are trying to learn this. And so you would be able to add something of value to a certain segment of that audience.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, like, also being as a business, from a business perspective, finding out what factor, what is your unique selling proposition. And I think as sometimes maybe it's that combination that makes you unique. You're like, okay, you know what, I come from this background and I do this is what makes me unique, and I can serve this segment of the world. And you're right, like, just because we know these coaches, our audience doesn't know these people. We might be seeing ads from a ton of other coaches as well, and you're like, there's so many people doing the same thing, but your audience doesn't know that. As we are wrapping up, as we are at
And
the
also,
end of,
I want to add one more point, is
yeah,
also don't underestimate the fact that you might not think that you can provide as much value as someone else,
yeah,
but the people that are coming to you trust you more than they trust those other people.
right.
And so that in and of itself is something of value to keep in mind that
Right.
can't really be replicated.
Yeah, yeah, because we buy from people we trust, we spend with them, and we buy from them. Zainab, I do appreciate all your comments. I've been trying to read them, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to read them aloud, but thank you for contributing and being here as well. So, as we one last question before we say salam to you, what is one book you recommend everyone reads?
So actually, if I can, my book, inshallah, is coming out. So Fiqh of Social Media will be published within the next couple of weeks, inshallah. So I'm going to recommend that one.
Absolutely, no, that's great. I was going to ask you, where can people find more about this? What is the book about, and how can people get a copy of it?
So it's really a lot of what we talked about. It's how to apply, these Islamic principles to the social media world. So things like intention, things like envy, things like how we interact with each other, the company that we keep, just how to mitigate and deal with those things. So all of that is kind of condensed down into a book format. So that'll be out on Amazon, inshallah, soon.
Can people sign up for a wait list? Can people get
Yeah,
notified?
if they go to ibnabiumar.com, ibnabeeomar.com /newsletter, they can sign up for the email list. And when they sign up for the email list, they'll also get a little free PDF, 40 hadith on social media. So it contains a lot of these same things. The hadith with very brief 1 paragraph explanation as to how to apply those hadith to social media interaction.
That's awesome. I did tag you in my stories because I can't. The comments will disappear after this live. But make sure to go check my stories, and you can actually click and find your handle there and click on that. So that will work for everyone. So you know where to find you. You know the book's coming out. When is the book coming out again?
Within about 2 weeks. I don't have the exact date because I'm still waiting on, it's self-published, so we're waiting on some of the proofs and stuff to come through, but within the next couple of weeks, inshallah.
But once you sign up for the wait list, once we sign up,
On the newsletter, you'll definitely get an announcement, yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad everyone found this conversation so beneficial. And I'm sure there's so much more that we didn't touch on. I'm sure this conversation can go so much deeper. I really recommend you get this book because, again, it's like that conversation starter whether you have kids at home, whether you have a spouse at home. All of these things are so much more relevant now than ever before because 2020 COVID has just been one of those years. So I highly recommend everyone gets that book. And Jazakallah for being here and sharing all your
Okay,
insights.
for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts or Google Play or whatever podcast player you use. And please rate and review the podcast. As always, if you share it with a friend, that's much appreciated. You can check the show notes for all the details and links. See you in the next episode.